Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on our free-form improv Ask Us Anything About Excel webinar this morning. My name is Dale Lutz. I'm one of the two co-founders of Safe Software, and I'm not particularly an Excel expert, which is why I'm glad to be joined by a panel of experts. And I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves in alphabetical order by their first name. So we'll see if they know how to use the Excel sort function.
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Andrea Eisma, and I think I got the alphabetical part right. I'm one of the FME desktop team leads, and I work a lot with Excel, so I'm looking forward to answering some of your questions this morning.
Awesome. I'll take the mantle next. I'm Brian Ponce, and I lead our support team here at Safe Software. I've had lots of experience with Excel over the years, some in FME, some on my own, but it is a great format to work with, and excited to see the questions today.
And I'm Chris Berger. I'm an FME technology expert here at Safe as well. Been around for about 3 years now, and I've worked with a variety of formats, and of course that includes Excel. So had a couple of run-ins with that one.
After the ABC, I'm M for Mark, and I'm an FME application expert and have struggled with Excel for quite some time because it's a simple format, but also very complex. So that's why we're here.
Yes. Our usage stats tell us that Excel is roughly the number, well, it is solidly the #2 format, both reading and writing in FME. So I'm not too surprised that so many of you have joined us today to share your Excel challenges and see what our team can come up with. So this is a little different kind of webinar. We don't actually have demos we're going to show you. We're just going to be taking stuff free form. I may challenge one or more of the team to just start up Workbench and show us live. That should put some fear into their hearts by me saying that. But otherwise, if you're looking for demos, we do have other resources that we are going to be pleased to share with you. There was a webinar done a bit earlier this year that had, I think, 5 different sort of patterns of use, and we can share that with you to view afterwards if you missed it, as well as different resources online and other places like that, which we'll be showing you. So while we're going today, you can raise your hand. We're going to try, with the help of Stephanie, who's off camera here, to
Hello.
yeah, Stephanie, maybe you should introduce yourself as well.
Sure. I think we have or let's see if I can actually share a webcam. I can. Hello. Yeah, so I'm Stephanie. I'm behind the scenes going to be helping everyone out. So if you have any questions with GoToWebinar, you can add that to the chat. And we do have the hand raise feature. So if anyone wants to come on the air live like I just did, you can go ahead and raise your hand and I'll come on and help you get set up. So it's kind of a fun thing to do. We always love it when people come online.
Yes. And otherwise, you can just type your questions into the question panel, not the chat panel, the question panel. And so when you type the questions, only the panelists at SAFE will see them. So it's not really a live discussion with everybody else, but we'll do our best to answer them either on the air. And if we can't get to yours today, which very likely we won't get to all of them, we will promise to follow up with you afterwards in some fashion or another. And so with that, let's see if we want to kick off the questions. I'm going to be looking at a few different screens here to figure out what to ask. And I don't know if this first question is serious or not, so I better not go for it. So, oh, I know what I'll ask to kind of just get us kicked off. Who wants to take on what do we have coming up in the next? Somebody's asked what's coming up in the next releases of FME with respect to Excel. Is it a stagnant format or is it evolving? And what are some of the highlights? Who wants to take a crack at that? Mark.
Definitely not a stagnant format. I can't say everything. I'm looking at the planned list that the development team have put together, and there is a raft of things that they want to attack on the Excel reader and writer. So it's pretty comprehensive. It's a long list, too long to go into here. I know one of the things that they're going to be working on is more flexibility when working with templates and putting templates out to multiple sheets and so on. So that'll be good. But no, it's definitely not a stagnant format for us. And I think that's reflected in the work that we've done in the last year. Probably at least 30 fixes done on the Excel based on customer reports, and then a whole raft of new features. Reading images was added into the Excel reader for our next release 2021. Support for XLSB reading, more stuff on working with templates, and standardizing on Excel dates and stuff. So quite a lot in 2021 as well coming.
So Mark, Joseph had asked exactly one of the things you touched on. What's the deal with XLSB? Do you want to just run us through how that works or what the ups and downs are?
I don't know how it works. I know it's a tricky thing because I think we do have to use the actual Excel libraries to do that. So our Excel support is done by a third-party library. So pretty well all the time you read and write Excel in FME, you don't need to have Microsoft Excel installed on your computer, which is great, particularly for people that are doing work on FME server. But the XLSB is done through some trickery using the Excel libraries, I believe. So that's the one place that you would need to have Excel installed on the machine that you're running your workspace on, and it will figure out that XLSB and open it up and read it for you in some magic way.
Right. I think under the covers, we actually make use of, as you say, the Excel that's installed, and then quietly convert that XLSB to an XLSX, read that, and delete the XLSX that we temporarily made. So it is a bit slower, but at least you don't have to do that step outside. I don't think we don't convert back to XLSB, do we, Mark? Do you know?
I don't think so, no.
No, we don't do writing. And of course, if you're one of us that's on a Mac or on Linux, then you're not going to have any luck with this either. So this XLSB thing is Windows only, but hopefully, Joseph, that helps you out there. Let's see, what else is looking good for questions?
Or it looks like we do have a hand raised, so I'm going to go ahead and try and bring them online. Panelists, hang on here. Okay, so let's see. Okay, I'm going to have to stop sharing my webcam because we have a limit here so that we can get Gerardo's online. Okay.
Hey guys.
Yes, hi.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, where are you from?
I'm in the US. I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I want to give Mark a shout out because of him, I got FME certified several years ago. I met him at an ESRI conference, and he told me, hey, because I told him, hey, I haven't been able to go to a training, and he said it's not a limited factor anymore. We have a different protocol. You can get certified. So he kind of guided me through that. So thank you, Mark. FME has marked my career in an extremely positive way. And I'm not only at desktop, I became server certified recently as well. So thank you for that. The challenge that I've been having where I need counsel is that we have a lot of clients that abuse Excel. They don't use it as a data or a data set or a database, if you call it something. Many of them want to use it as a report. So I know this is more of an Excel presentation, but we face the same challenges pushing stuff into a Word report template. So if you guys can shed some light and help us navigate those waters to figure out how we take a tabular form and shove it into either a Word template or an Excel template, how do we make that happen? Because that's a big thing for our industry, because otherwise we're forced to use SSRS or Power BI or some other tools that clients might not have available. So that's my question.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that. And I think we've done work on this. I don't know which one of our panelists wants to do it, but it seems to me like there was even a FME World Tour talk on this topic a year or two ago. So who wants to take it?
I can talk about that. We did something what you're referring to there, Dale, 2 years ago, where we built a template. As Mark was talking about a little bit earlier, templates are great because what you can do is have a very powerful Excel template that you've already defined. It has your header, it has fancy imagery, whatever you want in there. And then you can write or insert data into specific cells within that template. In the writer, you can actually specify where the data goes, and you can give it almost like coordinates. I want it in column this, and I want it in row here, and you can just insert those little pieces. And that's a really powerful way to do it, because the template itself can be whatever you want. It can look really, really fancy, but all FME is doing is taking the proper data and just sticking it right in the right spots. So yeah, we could share that workspace with you afterwards or with everybody. That's Perfect. A good one, good example.
Yeah, so and I think there's even ways that if there's a chunk of the template where you don't know ahead of time how many rows there's going to be, we can kind of expand the table so that the bottom stuff still is in the right spot afterwards.
That would be very, very useful because, you know, we work with, I'm in a consulting world, right? So we have a lot of transportation and water clients that have different requirements, and this would help a lot of people.
So what we'll do, even maybe if we can during the webinar, we'll see if one of the team or Stephanie can dig out. I think we should have a recording somewhere of that world tour talk. Maybe there's also other resources, and we'll make sure we share them with everybody, but specifically you, Gerardo. So thanks so much for the question and the kind words. I know that we always like to hear back that that people are having success with FME.
Yep, thank you.
Okay. All right. So let's see. Joseph, again, I'm kind of picking on Joseph because he's asking good questions. I don't know the answer to this. Well, I have a hunch I do. Do you know, does anybody here know if FME can trigger the run of an Excel macro?
Yeah, so I've actually had someone ask this in the past, and there is 2 ways of doing it. So the first one would be Python. So you use Python in FME to call Excel and essentially run the macro. That's a bit more of a hands-on approach. If you want to take another approach where the macro runs as soon as you open up the Excel workbook, that's another option. So if you want to do that approach, and I have a link that shows how to automatically run a macro when opening a workbook. But essentially what you would do is you would set up your Excel template, have that parameter set, and then use that template in the Excel writer. So that way, when you write your workspace or write your worksheet and then you open it up, it should run the macro immediately as soon as you open it.
So do you put that in a shutdown Python, Chris?
No, so it's actually one of the Excel parameters in, like, you have to be in Excel to do it. Yep. I believe you have to go into the developer ribbon, and then there's an option there to run the macro as soon as the workbook's opened.
Oh, I see. It's set up inside of Excel itself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you can do the same thing if you need to refresh data sets as well. So that can also be run as soon as you open the workbook. It can refresh all your data sources. So. And
then the Python approach is where do you call that in FME land?
That would be, so to do that approach, yeah, you could use a I'd probably use a Python caller, honestly. So I would write the Excel workbook with a feature writer. And then connecting to the summary port, I would put a Python caller and then call all the Python that you need to run the macro there.
Great. So Chris, please do share the link out in the chat to folks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Elizabeth asks, are there plans to allow template selection via an attribute instead of a fixed parameter? So who wants to take a crack at that one? So I guess in the Excel writer, you'd want to change which template you're going to use based on the value of an attribute. Mark.
I don't think our library supports that. So I think once you start the whole process, we're at the moment limited to one template. That just came up the other day in some requests from users around using a template sheet and then using that template sheet in multiple output sheets. And so the other kind of part of that was to see if we could use multiple templates as well. And I don't think that's possible at the moment in the libraries that we've got.
the newest feature writer. So if you use the feature writer in FME 2021, there is a group by function in there, and I wonder if you wanted to have several going at once, you might be able to assign. I don't know if it's possible to assign the template based on an attribute when you're in the feature writer, but those two in combination might allow you to pull something off. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's around, essentially what you're doing is you're copying sheets from multiple Excel files basically into a single Excel file, and that's not possible yet.
I think also that I saw that Mark is the developer is working on some of that stuff right now, so perhaps there'll be some answers there. But okay, thanks Elizabeth for that one. What other question do we like the look of? Let's see. Okay, who wants to take a crack at this? Which is better, or what's the difference between reading CSV or Excel? Is there any big difference, or what do you think?
I'll go.
Andrew, yeah, go for it, Mark.
Go? I mean, CSV is just going to be way faster. So if performance is your thing, go for CSV. But they're both very loosey-goosey formats. You can put anything in these formats, and so they both, you know, have that problem. It's hard to constrain users to what's going on in there. But if you have a choice, like a lot of databases, a lot of people who work with databases, they get data as database dumps. So the database administrator periodically just dumps tables out, and they can choose Excel or CSV. So if that's the source of your data, I would go with CSV.
Yeah, I think also we've seen like Excel basically there is a limit in terms of how much you can put in it. It might be very large, but nonetheless, there is a limit. Whereas CSV, basically, how much disk space do you have? That's the limit. So that's one. FME 2021 is debuting a new format called Parquet, which P-A-R-Q-U-E-T, which comes out of the big data Apache world and has many characteristics of CSV in terms of no data volume limit, but it also has baked in data types, proper support for nulls, the ability to have some compression built in. So it'll be interesting to see if Parquet can start to eat a bit of CSV's lunch moving forward in some FME workflows. Sounds a little exotic, but I think it could be good.
It's used a lot in the big data world, right, Dale? Like for working with databases like Snowflake or various web-based formats or applications. I think it's really powerful for using there.
Yeah, Databricks, I think if people are using that, or Azure Data Factory, those sorts of things, Parquet is often used in the middle of that. Okay, here's one that's kind of in our home field advantage area, I think. Does FME support geocoding in an Excel workflow, and is it free? Do answer.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at this one. So in terms of geocoding, yeah, the Excel reader can automatically detect X coordinates and Y coordinates, and you can set that in the reader parameters quite easily when you're initially setting up the reader, so that when you read in your data, you'll have point data coming through. In terms of is it free, we do have different trial options. So depending on you know, your situation, you could be trialing it out and see if it's right for your organization and your needs as well.
So follow-up question. Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
I was going to say there's also, if you're working with address data, another way to get location data from that, which is a great use case actually for just working with Excel within FME, is to visualize that data if it does have location information. We have a geocoder transformer that you can hook up to the data, and then you can use all kinds of different geocoding services. Some of them are free, some of them are paid, like ArcGIS Online. I've played with a few. OpenStreetMap's great, and yeah, you just put the geocoder down and you can configure it to use those different services, and away you go.
Yeah,
I might challenge one of you to share your screen and show us what a geocoder looks like in FME, because I think there's quite a bunch of options in there. some of which are paid and some which aren't. So who's going to take the challenge?
I can do it. Just give me 1 second. I'm opening up Workbench.
All right.
Do you want to
Stephanie,
tackle another question while we're at it?
sure. Stephanie, you make Chris the presenter and we'll get him to pop that up. So let's look. Ooh, what does FME have for functions that can handle changing case, the case of data as well as concatenation? Okay, well, let's go back. Chris has got the geocoder there. So so you rub your Excel data in there, and then what do you have to do, Chris?
Right, so yeah, once you have your Excel data, your Excel reader hooked up to that geocoder, you just have to double click on the transformer right there and it'll pull up the geocoder parameters. So all the services that Brian was mentioning are listed in here. So I think by default it's on, I want to say it's on Google, but I might have changed that when I opened it. You have other options as well if you want to do ArcGIS Online, ArcGIS server, and you'll see that when I click and change them, you'll notice that the parameters change. So this one actually uses connection information, so a username and password, and you can choose to generate a token, or it can use a web service as well if you have a connection already configured. Alternatively, if I go to one such as Google, you'll notice it uses an API key. So you can get that from, usually the service, you'll have a login on that end, so that'll probably be on your Google admin page. You'll get the token there. And then the free ones that he was mentioning are ones like OpenStreetMaps, where there's no API token, no login required. You just have to point it to that attribute. So I don't have anything configured right now, so I don't see any of the attributes, but that's where you would point it.
I think also those ones that you might be rate limited, so you can't pound it and get everything. Okay, yeah. Thanks for that, Chris. I think back to Andrea. I just wanted to add that our ability to kind of recognize the lat and long field and so on, that was improved in the current FMEs. And I think if you are in Sweden and Germany and a bunch of other places, we'll make a guess at the local language for X and Y. Or and so on. And so actually that was where I was kind of embarrassed because I asked the team to do it for French as well, but it turns out in latitude and longitude are latitude and longitude in French. So there wasn't really any translation needed for that. Okay. So what
I've got a tip, Dale, for if you don't want to hammer a service that you're using, this could be geocoding or anything on the web, there's a transformer that we have that will slow things down. Which is funny, you really don't want to slow things down most of the time, but in these cases you can, and it's called the decelerator. And you can basically put a little weight between each feature hitting a service, and that usually solves that problem.
FME is just too darn fast, we got to slow it down. So yeah, back to this thing about formatting tools that handle text, case, and concatenation. What do we have for helping with that?
Shortcut wasn't working there. There we go. I think we have a bunch of different options there, really. If you want to have this all done in a single transformer, you could use the attribute manager and just use like string functions. But if you want to see the individual transformers themselves, there's things like a string concatenator, which you can put down on the canvas and then configure it straight in there. It's a bit easier of a layout. You can kind of see what's happening directly in there instead of relying on the FME functions, which can look a little bit more intimidating, but you have a suite of different transformers that you can use. And I think for strings themselves, there's like 47 different ones. So that can be kind of limitless with what you want to do there.
Awesome. And that's for, if you're talking about changing the case of the column names, then that's a little bit different. And I think there's, what do we have there? Like they call those attribute names, right? So you can either rename your attributes or there's a bulk renamer that can be used as well if you're looking to change the data model for case. But yes, lots and lots of tools. And actually, just about anywhere in FME where you are looking for a parameter, you can go ahead and bring up an editor and start concatenating things together. So it's a common trick.
Yeah, I would definitely say like one tip for that, if you want to rename things, just type on the canvas rename and you'll see a list of everything that pops up. So if you only want to rename individual attributes at a time, you can put down the attribute renamer, which will be the first on the list. If you have, say, all of your attributes use underscores and you want to remove those and replace them with spaces, you could use the bulk attribute renamer, which is the second on the list. So you'll get a lot of different options just by typing what you want to do on the canvas, and it'll just show you all the transformers that are available for that if you don't want to dive into the FME functions.
You know what? I'm just going to have to ask Stephanie. Can you just make Chris the presenter for the rest of this time, because I got to think that his screen would be more interesting than what we're looking at here. So
Okay.
I know that I don't know if anybody's from Missouri. I think that's the show me state. I'm going to say that the rest of this webinar is going to be in Missouri, and I want Chris to show me. So what are you talking about here, Chris? You're just going to go out there and start typing?
Just gonna change that screen around. Sorry if it's blacking out. I know when the go-to panel overlaps, it usually has a little bit of a black screen. But yeah, as I was saying, if you just click on the canvas and type rename, you get this list of all the different transformers that pop up. So you have the attribute renamer at the start, bulk attribute renamer, and then if you want to go down into lists and geometry properties as well, that's all there. For Excel, it would probably be most relevant to use these two. After reading in your data, if you're building lists, then yeah, maybe the list renamer will be relevant.
Great. And then since we're in here, can you just show us those string ones you were talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's put an attribute manager down, and I'll open up the parameters just by going into the open text editor here. And you guys are probably familiar with this look. You get to see this whenever you're editing anything that has a text value or anything like that. So you have this panel on the left side, and I'll just expand it a bit because there's some good ones in here. You see there's special characters and there's FME functions, but we also have string functions as well. So this is where you could do all the same things that the transformers can do. But if I say I want to get word, this would be the string. So I would point this to the attribute. In this case, it'll be the current attribute. And I can choose the index. So if I want the third word, I would put 2 because it starts at 0. Similarly, you can do that for changing cases as well. So if you want it to be uppercase, sorry, I'll clear that out so it's a little bit clearer. So if I want to do uppercase for the current attribute, it would just be handled just like that as well.
Right. Often, like right now, you don't have any attributes connected in there, but they would be the attribute name, like name or address or whatever it would be. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I just put that down, you'll see what it looks like. I'll go into open text editor, and yeah, it's just as simple as double clicking to add the uppercase function, and you can see that string is already pre-selected. So if I double click on my attribute now, it replaces it with that attribute value.
Awesome. Okay. So Per asks, how do I get FME to reread the Excel file whenever I run the workspace? So who wants to take a bite into that one?
Yeah, so I'm happy to answer that. There's a couple of ways that you could do that. The reason maybe why you're not seeing Excel being reread is you're likely using feature caching. So if you still want to use feature caching, make sure you rerun entire workspace. So Chris is showing the feature caching, and then there's this option to rerun entire workspace. So that will make sure that you are refreshing those caches as well. Alternatively, you could also turn off feature caching and run your workspace again.
Excellent, Andrea. And I'm thinking that maybe for the development team, we could do something to invalidate the caches if we detect that the date changed on the Excel source. So there's an enhancement.
Not a bad enhancement.
Thanks for that.
I like that.
Yeah, thanks.
There's another level to that question, which is what if your source data is changing all the time and you want to have a flexible workspace, which is where Mark and my favorite tool in FME comes in, which is dynamic mode. So that's another thing to explore. We have some really good tutorials on that. But setting up the reader to be dynamic means that when you pull in the different Excel files or even run it with a different Excel file, you'll still apply all the same workspace logic to that file. So that's a good way. And there's actually a very neat little setting inside the reader parameters when you add your Excel file that says scan schema. Maybe Chris can pull this up. Yep. So if you hit parameters there and you go down to...
One second here.
Yeah.
I'll just grab a file.
What the setting does effectively is it just rereads the Excel file every time you run the workspace. So it just checks that the schema is the same or different, and it basically allows that extra level of dynamic mode for Excel, which is really cool. So yeah, if you go at the very bottom there, I think, hard to see on your screen, but there you go. Yeah. to give that a try.
That's just this one here in advance. There's scan schema. Sorry if that's kind of cut off the screens a little bit. There we go, that's a bit better. So yeah, this is bottom one here. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Somebody's asking, they're saying they're fairly new to FME and programming. What programming language is used in that text editor that Chris was just bringing up? Who wants to take a crack at that? And I'm laughing because the joke's kind of on me, but we'll see what we'll make the panel sweat and then see what they come up with. Nobody
I'm blanking. I have no idea.
It's unfortunately it's the Dale and Don Murray programming language. Dale Lutz and Don Murray. It was an invention that we came up with to use @ signs. It's kind of like our own macro language that's in there for this kind of stuff. Now you can use real Python in other places in FME or real TCL if you're an old timer like Mark or I. But this is just really our own syntax for calling our functions, kind of like our own macro language. In fact, actually, the first name for FME was supposed to be TCL, Translation Control Language. That actually was what we had briefly until we realized that that name was taken. And then we, in a flash of inspiration at 1 a.m. one night, said, let's change it to FME, Feature Manipulation Engine. And then we were stuck with that name forevermore. So anyway, that's the history there. But before Chris gets rid of that, David is asking, what is this current attribute that we see there and when is it used? I can't remember what it is. Who wants to take a crack at that?
I'll be honest that I don't really use it all that much, but I believe it just refers to the current attribute that you're editing there.
I think it's for some of the transformers where you can pick multiple attributes and then it would go through and cycle through them all. Is that right, Mark or Brian? Does any of you know?
Yeah, it's pretty limited in its use, and I did use it the other day, and I'm just trying to think of where I was using it. But yeah, I don't know why it appears everywhere because it's not really useful everywhere. It's pretty limited in its use, but it is where there are some functions where you can cycle through a bunch of attributes, and the current attribute will be used there. So I'd have to dig back through that and try and find that where I used that. But yeah, we probably shouldn't have it visible everywhere because it's not that widely used really.
Try to remember, it might be something like some of those ones, like I think, like for example, a trimmer or some of those, but you wouldn't use it there. But some of them let you kind of select 5 attributes and then run the same function over all 5. So anyway, David, you kind of stumped us. So that's a good one. Oh,
but
somebody.
back to the languages, I do have to add that I have grown up actually, and in the little scripting that I do, I have moved totally to Python. I'm afraid I've left the TCL to you, Dale.
I'm just speechless, Mark, and I thought I had you as an ally, and now in front of a live audience, I get told this. I feel, what's next? That's a big stab in the back, and I'm very upset. And I'm the only one left. Or the last person using TCL, please stand up.
I think Dan Eistminger is still with you.
Okay, so at least when the TCL experts group at SAFE goes out for lunch, we can ask for a table for 2. Okay, so Brian, Julie's asking more about this dynamic mode, and I know that you're sort of Mr. Dynamic at SAFE. There are tutorials and things on this. Do you want to just point us at them and give us an elevator pitch on dynamic?
Yeah, I'll put the main tutorial into the chat as a link. But the basic of it is, do you want to create workspaces that are incredibly flexible? I think everyone would probably say yes. Do you have data that changes frequently? A lot of us do, and we did actually a great webinar, which we can also link to, that talks about the problems that you encounter when your source data, the schema is changing all the time. How do you handle that? And we call that schema drift, and it's very common. And so what dynamic does in FME is it allows you to bring in any, let's use Excel as an example, but bring in any Excel sheet that you want at runtime into the workflow and process it through the logic in your workspace. So you're not defining that exact Excel sheet when you create the workflow. You are saying, I want to use any Excel sheet in this workflow. And so dynamic mode, really what it's doing is when you run FME, it goes back to the source and says, hey, can you tell me again who you are and what you look like? I'm going to reread you and then push you through the workspace. And so that's great if you're, let's say you have 1,000 shape files, for example, and you need to reproject all of them, and they're all different, but you're doing the same logic to every single one of those things. Dynamic mode will save that, save your brain from exploding when you go to do that yourself manually. So you can point it at all 1,000 files and it'll run right through. So again, dynamic's really great when your data is changing, you don't have a standard schema, but you want to do the same thing over and over again to your data. Hopefully I'm explaining that well. It's a bit of a tricky concept, but our tutorial really runs through it. And here's a kicker. If you're looking at your workspace that you've built and you see a ton of repetition in there, either repetition in your transformers or repetition kind of like what Chris is showing on the screen, lots of different reader feature types sitting there, but you're doing the same thing to all of them, think about using dynamic. Even just go look up the dynamic tutorial and see if that's going to be something that makes your life just a little bit easier. And it's really easy to set up actually. So Chris, to do a dynamic mode on the reader, what do you have to do to set that up?
Yeah, so it's really easy. So if I just point this to, that's a different one. That one's not going to have multiple sheets actually. So let's use a better example. I'm going to copy that one. So if I type Excel and add the reader and point it to my data set, the one I had currently was individual feature types, and that's what's corresponding to these reader feature types in the canvas here. Instead, if I use single merged feature type, this is going to show up as one single reader feature type. And there you go. So what Brian was mentioning is if you're doing a lot of repetition here, that's not really necessary, especially if you're doing the same thing in all of those. Instead, you could do the same thing into all of the sheets, and you'll see that when you open up those reader feature type parameters, there's this merge feature type option as well. So this is just using a wildcard to select all of the sheets in the Excel file.
Yep. And you can do the same thing on the writer, but definitely walk through the tutorial. It's great. It'll kind of change your brain about how you build workspaces, that's for sure.
So I see Stephanie has posted the link to the Schema Drift webinar, and I know that there was a few different things in that webinar, but we did talk about this as well. And maybe I can get one of the panel to post the link to Brian's famous tutorial, which
I'm grabbing it right now for
everybody.
There we
go. So watch for that. Let's see. What else do we want to ask?
I do want to share one tidbit because I've seen a couple of questions about it. Someone's asking about auto width for cells, and if we can, instead of hard coding the length of the cell width, someone's asking if we can just auto set it. And with FME 2020 and newer, you certainly can do that. You just have to set the width in the writer to 0, and that will set it to automatic.
So maybe can you just pop it up, Christian, and show us where that would go? Oh, there it is in the formatting business. Yeah, there we go.
And then,
so
then make sure that cell width is 0, and when you write it, you should have an auto set width.
Ooh, that's cool.
Yeah.
You have to watch this webinar to find that out, though. I mean, that's always a challenge. It's not going to be obvious to folks unless they know, but at least we can do it. So we'll work on figuring out how to make that more discoverable with time, but at least it can be done. So that's fantastic.
We'll make sure it's in the documentation for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So is it possible to write an image of, to put images into Excel? Does anybody, if I've got data going by and I want to write an image in, is that a possible thing?
Yes. A little tricky because there are some underlying format attributes you have to set to say what cell you want that to go into. But I think that webinar that Andrew and I did that is posted somewhere in the chat or something does have an example of that. So there's a workspace that should do that, I think, in that Excel webinar that we did. But those are the, yes, Chris is highlighting the underlying format attributes that you have to play around with there. The size of your raster, and then what row and column you want to stick that raster into. It's best to do it with a template file because then your rows and columns will be nicely aligned. But it is
there's
possible.
also an article. I'm just going to send that out in the chat. So if you want some more information on how to do that, we do have an article about writing images. So it will kind of walk you through setting those attributes. So
and I think I know I've seen examples before where we use a web service to go out and get a little map tile, for example, from you know, some kind of data is going by and we lift out a map tile and put it in. I've seen that. That's a common example. If you want to,
that's what that tutorial kind of is using as well. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay, there you go. I mean, you can also use the Mapnik rasterizer for if you want to just draw each one at a time, although that might not be as exciting. Usually getting a map tile with some context is a bit nicer. Okay, let's see.
There's a couple that have gone by, Chris, so maybe you can just start to add another Excel reader to your workspace and go to the parameters. Because a couple of people have asked about if I've got an Excel sheet and the row, the field names or the data doesn't start at the top of the sheet. And so that over there is where Chris is pointing, is where you can say, this is where my field names start, and then you can say where your data rows start. So if you need to skip rows, that's where you need to do that in the sheet.
And you can actually see this as a preview as well. So you can see there's a little preview of what the Excel file actually looks like. So right now I have the field names in row 1, which isn't actually correct, or it is correct, sorry, but they're showing up as ABC. The schema looks correct down here, but if I change it to say row 5 and I click off of there, you can see the names of the attributes have actually changed. So it's now D4 and D4 instead of the actual column names.
Excellent.
And the same can be done for the cell range as well. So if you need to limit it to a certain range, or if you want it to start later than 6, then you have that option as well.
Excellent. So I'm going to pick a tough question, put everybody on the spot here. There's someone who, we won't get into picking the names here, but someone's on the call that their company is considering other tools besides FME to prep data for Excel. What would be your pitch about why they should choose FME for their Excel data prep and kind of grinding needs? Who wants to take a crack at that?
A tricky one. I think we probably all have some ideas, but one of the big takeaways for me is just the ability to work with all kinds of other different formats in tandem with your Excel file and merging and joining all that data together. Plus crunching it really fast is really obviously important, but that extendability that FME has can be really powerful for different workflows. I'm sure there's other ideas on the panel.
Yeah, well, the repeatability as well. And of course, the FME platform with the automations so that you can automate all your jobs. I think that's a really big part. But I would agree with Brian. I think the biggest thing is like the integration of multiple data sets and formats to pull them all together and then write those out to Excel or some other format.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, I think too, we tend to be pretty good value. This webinar, we're not talking about the whole FME platform, but the stuff Chris is showing is the desktop part of FME, but there is a server part where you can take these workflows and publish them up there and then have them run automatically when things change, or you can make server apps that your organization can use to access this type of functionality without having it on their desktop. So those are some of the other things that I would definitely consider as you're doing your evaluation. Let's see. SQL queries. Mark, I'm going to put, well, any of you should be excited to answer this one. Can you use SQL queries to manipulate data that came from Excel in an FME workflow? I'm setting you up. Who's going to spike it? Mark.
Okay. So you can't use SQL queries in the actual Excel reader like Aware. That was one of the things we lost when we moved from the Microsoft Excel API to the API that we use now. But Chris is showing you the inline querier here. So if you have multiple sheets that you need to combine and do nice SQL queries with, if that's what you're comfortable in, then the inline querier is there. And we actually just did a webinar on joining and merging data to show you the other different options that you have to inline querier if you're not comfortable in joining. So maybe somebody can chat that up, the link to that. But I guess most of us would say, based on the COVID experience in the UK, where they were using Excel as a database, maybe you're not using the right tool for that data.
We should get Stephanie to also chat out our recent blog written by our friend from Sweden, Ulf, on this issue. He's been talking about this for many, many years. Yes, so there was a blog that was just on our site about this as well. So Chris, ultimately you would go down to that SQL query and basically author one there, right? Yeah, you hit the ... and now you're writing a SQL query against what just, yeah.
Yeah, and there's lots of great tools in there. You can, if you right click, it's there somewhere, it'll start to give you some ideas on what the SQL scripts you can put in there and so on.
Yeah.
I think you can select multiple too, right?
Flavor of SQL.
Yeah. So what happens there, for those that are interested, temporarily we make a SQLite database out of the input data very, very fast, and then execute queries and send the results on their way. So that's that one. But yeah, check out the spatial join. I see that Stephanie has chatted that out, or not spatial join, just attribute join. We have a spatial join webinar being planned for sometime later this year on how you can do that. And that's also worth mentioning. If your data involves anything to do with location at all, FME has an extremely rich and deep library of functionality to do with that. So so that's another plus for FME in the land of Excel. Can you update an Esri geodatabase from Excel?
Yes.
Yeah, you certainly would be able to. Just depends on, you know, what exactly you're needing to do, but we have the capability to write to a geodatabase, and if you're looking to update it, there's different ways. We actually, I think, have done a couple of change detection webinars recently as well, and we have some articles covering change detection if you're looking for that sort of workflow too.
But yeah, if you somehow have your changes in an Excel spreadsheet somehow,
Yeah.
Mark and his group have certainly done lots of work influencing the product direction over all these years, so that our writers, especially geodatabase ones, have this concept of going into an update mode, and then you say which the key field is and what you want to update, and then we will do those updates. So that's good. Hey, here's one. We cannot do a webinar on Excel without talking about PDF, the place where data goes to die. Except that this question is, can we read in a PDF and go to Excel? Can we do PDF to Excel? Who wants to take a crack at that?
Put it down on the canvas. Yes, we can read PDF. I want to say yes, you can. It might not be as easy as you think though. Like, depending on how the PDF really is, it could be easy. But if it's coming in as a rasterized PDF, you're gonna have to put a lot more work into this. There's gonna be a lot more transformers you're going to need to use, and it might be a rather complex workspace, but depending on how that PDF is formatted, it could be pretty straightforward.
And that is really the problem with PDF, is that it's a pretty wild and undisciplined format. So I know if you don't care about spatial data in PDF, the spatial stuff we can pick out and then you can try to make sense of. But if it's a bunch of tables or tabular data that you want to get to Excel, it depends on how that thing was created in the first place. And there are some tabular PDFs we can read lickety split, and other ones that we can't. And I mean, I would certainly tip my hat to things like Tableau is an excellent tool for basically wringing out data out of PDF. And then in terms of tabular stuff, I think Tableau's got us beat, but we at least can give it a crack in some cases. Let's see. Who else? Does anybody else see an interesting question? We got about 10 minutes left. What else do we want to talk about?
There's one thing that we haven't really touched on, which is, can you do, row styling, different text styling? How do you handle colors and changing the look and feel of the Excel file when you create one? So I see Chris is putting something down there. What is that thing, Chris?
I was thinking you were going to narrate while I did the actions, but we have the Excel styler here. So yeah, you can do all of your styling here in the Excel styler. Wow, that's a bit of a tongue twister for you. But yeah, you can apply this to the entire row, or you can apply it to the cell. Here you'll find there's really a lot of the similar options that you have in Excel. So you can do any of the number formatting, font formatting, and things like fill as well, so color fills. And this applies to, yeah, again, the row or the cell. The other option is in the Excel writer. And I don't think this is as commonly used. Correct me if I'm wrong here, anyone, but you have the formatting option in here as well. So you can do it two ways here.
Yes, this one applies the formatting to the entire column, whereas the styler is it's more freestyle. Let's just keep working the word style in, and every row can be radical. You can make the most awful Excel file you could ever fathom with the Excel styler if you were so motivated. Because
someone was also asking if they could conditionally style based on different values. And
let's
I
go
don't
with
know if anyone on the panel has any tidbits to add, but
so the answer there is like you can't. So you have to be careful when it's conditional, because there's two conditionals going on here. One is conditional that Chris is on right there, which lets us choose options as the data goes by, and we will hard code them then for that row forevermore. So if Chris pops that up and we would say, if the value was less than 5, then we'll make it red. Well, for that row, if the value was less than 5 at that moment, that row now is, or that cell would be colored red for eternity. And if whoever got this Excel sheet would change it to 10, it's not going to change the color. The condition was done as the data went by. We can't right now write a conditional into Excel so that it's live in Excel. But maybe you could with a template. If you had the template made with these, I think that it might be able to be preserved, but I don't know. Have any of you actually tried to deal with conditionals that are live in Excel?
I don't want to say 100%. I feel like that is possible. We'd have to test it again.
You can in a limited way, not the way most people would like, but under the in the actual sheet writer, in the feature type, if you go there, Chris, on the sheet 1, and go to the user attributes, there formatting, you can use simple custom formatting that Excel supports, and you can use their syntax, and that includes coloring and so on. That is all quite well explained in the documentation. Our Excel documentation is really extensive and actually quite good. So that is all described there. But so you can add simple functions there, like if it's less than this blue, if it's more than that red, and so on like that.
Excellent.
To that point too, you can send functions into a brand new sheet, right? Just actual Excel functions.
Oh. Yeah.
And that just requires a special syntax. I think we have some good knowledge articles that show that.
Okay, I got a softball one. Is there any workflow to be able to calculate statistics from an Excel spreadsheet and output them in an interesting way? Let's see if the fastest twin arm in the West, Chris, can do it. There it is.
I'll let you talk about the statistics calculator though, because it's your favorite one.
Yes, so the stats calculator is there. You can turn, you just wrote data in and you can turn off and on the various kind of stats that you might want. You pick a column. Do you want the min, the max, whatever, and it will do it, and it'll do it fast. And you can group by different things. So if you want the stats based on a various, let's say only by the letter and number, then you would do that as well, and it would make separate groups. So anyway, definitely possible. And then of course you can route the output of the statistics calculator to any format, be it Excel, or maybe you want to make you know, a shape file out of that, just because that's what people do. That would be fun as well. So there we go. Let's see. Someone says they've got 50 sheets in Excel and they want the readers to start at row 14 on each one. Does anyone have some ideas on how you got all these sheets? That smells like we want to go into a dynamic mode to me. The question then, like what Chris has done there, where you got the all business, and then in the parameters, is there some way that you would tell it to start at row 14 on all of them?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I don't
Yeah,
know.
you got it there, Chris.
Yeah. So would you have to do this on every single one in here, every sheet?
Yeah, per sheet for sure.
Per sheet, okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if that would apply, because there is another thing with Excel that you should be aware of if you're processing multiple files. There is this, I'm just gonna drop these, close those a bit. There's this multiple file parameters option here. So additional file settings is currently using the FME default. You'd actually want to use the current settings. So if you're going to be reading in, like, say, the 50 files in this case, this is what's going to help solve that.
Yes. So check that out. I mean, in the worst case, you could set it up to just start reading at 1 and then put a sampler in. So why don't you show them that, Chris? How can you show me a sampler afterwards? So get these all going back to 1, which would be the default situation. And then we're going to throw away everything. So basically, we're going to throw away the first 14 rows. Right. And now we would want them not sampled. So the first 14 would come out the sampled. So we would want the other output port, and then you would, yeah, you take, yeah, there you go. And so that's another way to skin the cat, to use some colorful farm imagery. Let's see. Can stats return the top 10? That's a histogramming thing. Do we have any kind of histogrammer in there that, in the stats calculator, that can get us?
I think that might be tucked away in this additional arrow. So if I click on that, kind of shoots extra options out here. So you have things like mean, median, mode, numeric count, and the far right one is histogram. Oh, I have to select an attribute first. Oop.
You gotta go
Sorry.
back.
Something was flashing up on here.
Okay.
Cancel that. There we go. That's better. We'll go there, and we'll click on that little arrow, shoot to the far side, and we have our histogram.
Yeah, and then I haven't looked at that, but I think from that histogram, does that give you a list, or how does that histogram come out?
It's a good question. Let's take a look.
We don't know.
Let's see what happens. So to check for if it's a list, I wonder if that's because that one's not numeric. Let's do just number.
Anyway, I think your point, Claire, is good, and we'll note that. There we go. So we got we do have a histogram, and now that you've got a list, then in FME there's ways to sort the list, and you could pick off the top 10 and so on. So we'd have to. I'm sure we have a tutorial on list processing somewhere that would help us on that. Oh man, we're out of time. I think we could probably keep going the whole day. So
that certainly went very fast. And there's so many more questions that we could definitely get to. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, one day we can do a part 2.
Yes. I think maybe we you know, since there's not a logical end point, why don't we just kind of call it there? We will promise Brian and his team will comb through these, and if we didn't answer yours today, over the next few days, we'll be getting back to you. But I think I'll wrap it up, and I don't know if each of you, actually somebody did say, let's finish with this. I'm going to ask each of you, what's your top Excel functionality that you think is underappreciated? And so whoever wants to go first, we'll finish up with that, and then Stephanie will take us home.
Goodness, was a tough one
Maybe.
to end it.
I don't know, maybe I'll start off. My favorite one, at least utilizing the power of FME, is being able to fan out based on different attributes. So if you have you want to create multiple sheets, you can use an attribute to filter that out. So that's probably one of my favorites.
Yeah, I can go next. I've used name ranges before with Excel, and then reporting based on the named range, so making like graphs and things like that. And within FME, you can actually write to a named range by specifying that actual text of the name, and build a nice table within your Excel file. So that's pretty powerful. And yeah, that would be for me.
Guess we're going alphabetical again here. And you've got me, deer with its head. I'm a deer staring at headlights right now. What would be my favorite thing? I would say whenever you're reading in Excel, you have the option to have FME create points right away for you. So you don't have to use a vertex creator to build the points. So that kind of just helps to take one step out of your workspace. It makes it a little bit simpler.
Oh, you're muted, Mark.
ABCD, it's Dale.
Ooh!
Oh, curveball.
Right back at me. Yikes. I was actually going to go for Andrea's, but if I can't go for Andrea's, then I would do the next up, and I'll see if Chris can show me that. But that is to do a data set fan out on Excel. So in other words, I can create many Excel files in one run. So not only can I have many sheets, and if I do the data set fan out and turn that on, then I can make many different files in one run as well by basically separating the data very, very quickly and painlessly. So that's the one, Mark. Ooh, that was tricky though.
You can even zip those as well.
And I'll carry on from Brian's thought there, because Brian was talking about named ranges. So that's to do that, you'd have to use a template, because you build a template that has your named range, has your charts, and also pivot tables and all those other great reporting tools and things that you've got in Excel. So I think exploring the idea of templates and looking at those tutorials will really expand the power of your Excel. And then the other thing, which I discovered not so long ago, is Excel also has a mapping tool in it. And so you can actually bring up maps that Chris, where did we show that? We showed that at some webinar or presentation recently. I can't remember where. But
that was the September Excel.
In Excel, and you can create a map and whatever. So that's pretty exciting too. That would also be done through a template. So I think templates, understanding templates when you're writing out is really the key to good reporting.
Well, thank you all for those great wrap-up comments, and especially Mark for putting me on the spot. Thank you. And, with that, Stephanie, what's next?
Yeah, I'll just wrap up with some quick housekeeping. We weren't able to get to all the questions today. There were so many amazing ones coming in, and we sure appreciate everyone taking the time to chat in their questions. If we didn't get to your question, a great place to share it is in the FME community, where it's basically this webinar 24/7 with a lot of FME experts from around the world. We had a ton of people chatting in tips as well, which was really cool to see. And we hope that everyone who chatted in a tip is also a member of the FME community, because that's exactly what that community is about. So definitely check out the community, share your questions there if we didn't get to you. And if not, we tend to do a webinar every week, if not twice a week, so we can always see you at the next one too. Dale, I think you're up next week with H3.
It's all about the hexagons, baby.
Oh, it's gonna be a fun one. Yeah, so I think what we will do is close this down. We can all share, like turn off our webcams. I will keep the webinar running for another like 5 minutes if anyone wants to like save out a link. We won't be emailing out the links that were chatted out, so do go in and save them if you are interested in them. And a reminder as well that we have a handout of an Excel ebook as well that you can download. So definitely check out those resources, and we will see you in the FME community.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.
Everybody.